I'm here on the salt line, this disused railway line in Cheshire, called the salt line because it used to take, well, it was a railway line, it used to take salt from the processing factories up in Middlewich down to the potteries where they were using the ceramics industry, I think. But I always think, well, I think several things when I walk on this salt line. I think about Darwin's sand walk, actually. I imagine this as a kind of version of my sand walk, the salt walk. You know, it's a place where you can just set up kind of rhythms of walking and that allows you to think. But I wouldn't want to compare myself too favourably to Darwin, of course. But I do a lot of the thinking on this line, and I do a lot of thinking whilst I'm walking. And right now I'm thinking about walking, and I'm thinking about tramping, actually. Tramping as a kind of concept, it's part of walking. It's a really great word, tramping. Tramp, 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 tramp. There's something very right about the sound. I don't know, maybe it's just because I'm an English speaker, it probably doesn't make sense to other people. But it does sound very right, you know. And that beginning bit of the trrr sound, I think is interesting. It seems to me that quite a few words that begin with that sound refer to movements that are kind of away on the flat, or perhaps away, and they're requiring a bit of effort, and they've got some impact to them. You know, like tramp, but also trek, trail, trudge, trample, traverse. There's something very, like almost, what's the word, onomatopoeic about it. Like there's a kind of synesthetic relationship between the sound and the thing it describes, you know. Like there is with other words, like words that begin with SL, sl. I think those are quite onomatopoeic as well. They often refer to words that are, or to concepts that are going away and down, like slip, slide, slope, slither, that kind of thing. Or words that begin with FL, fl, often refer to concepts, or refer to words that are for concepts that are going away and up, like fly, float, fling, flee. Yeah, those kind of words. And I think TR, trudge, trek, trail, traverse and tramp are something similar to that. I think they're talking about words that do this thing that I'm doing right now, or has that some kind of relationship to that. You know, they're, as I say, it's words to do with moving rhythmically, perhaps with some impact across the surface. I mean, listen to the sound my boots are making. Hold on. Is it just me, or can I hear an impact there? Sound. Followed by the grating of the gravel underneath. Which is a bit like the fricative R that follows it, you know? Trr, trr, trr. Maybe that's just me. So tramp. Tramp is a great word. Vaguely similar to two words that sound like it, I think. This is tamp, T-A-M-P, and trample. You know, it's not either of those words, but it's similar, isn't it? It's in the same family, it seems to me. You know, tamp, nobody even uses tamp these days. But tamp is when you press something down or press something in, isn't it? Like if you've got a muzzle-loading gun, if you lived 400 years ago and you had a muzzle-loading rifle, you would put the powder in, then you put the wadding in, and then you'd have a long stick, and you would tamp the wadding down, you'd press it into place, tamping it. And there's something very tamping about tramping, isn't there? You know, pressing the ground into place, pressing your footprint into the earth. And it's also a little bit like trample, which is kind of tramping, but it's tramping out of control, and tramping that's got some tamping to it, because you're putting something underfoot when you trample something, aren't you? Trampling. Tamping and trampling. I read in an online sports article a couple of days ago. It was a report about two American football teams, and I think it said something like, so I can't remember the names of the teams, but Kentucky was involved, so I'll say Mississippi tramples Kentucky. That was the phrase. It was something like that. One team had trampled another. Mississippi tramples Kentucky. That's really interesting, because it seems to me it's about tamping them down, isn't it? It's about pushing them into the earth, almost literally, if you're doing something like football, aggressive football game. But it's also about stampeding in a wild and uncontrolled way across them. It's that kind of trample. But it's also about status, isn't it? I mean, it isn't just that you've immobilised them and tamped them into the earth and made them part of the earth. You've also put yourself above them. If you're trampling something, you're above them, aren't you? You know, if you get trampled by wild buffalo, then you're on the ground and the buffalo are on top of you. So there's something of the status games to do with superiority and inferiority in that word as well, I think. You know, when Mississippi tramples on Kentucky, they're all over them, you know, all over them like a rash. Come on, peeps. And again, that's something to do with the hierarchy, isn't it? So that it's part of that. Well, it probably takes too long to explain it, but it's part of a much bigger metaphor, much bigger figurative language to do with high up things being of greater quality to low down things. You know, if something's high up, then it's bigger quality. Or say higher quality, I can't escape it in the language. You know, it's superior. The word itself means high up, doesn't it? It's no accident that kings sit on big thrones and people have to prostrate themselves before them and make themselves lower. So it's part of that as well, you know. So when Mississippi tramples Kentucky, it tamps them into the ground. It tramps over them in this march of TR sounds, but it also puts itself above them in this wild, uncontrolled way. Trample. So tramp, I think, lies between tamp and trample. It's usefully connected to those. But then there's other things about being a tramp, isn't there? You know, the fact that we've turned it into a noun, and now it means a person who's homeless or stateless or rootless. It's a person who wanders. Perhaps a disreputable person who wanders, associating with gypsies and thieves, if the song is to be believed. A tramp. Someone who hasn't got a home to go to, so their feet are their only home, and they're on the march, you know. So that no country can be like no country. That tramp. With archetypal tramps, people like Charlie Chaplin, particularly early Charlie Chaplin films. This kind of shabby character that just kind of wanders into people's lives at the beginning of a movie and then wanders out at the end while the iris closes around his departing figure. With his feet pointing out, you know, Charlie Chaplin's feet are like this, aren't they? And he walks like that, as if he's forever at a crossroads, not deciding which way to tramp. Does he tramp this way or does he tramp this way? Always caught in the crossroads of his own indecisiveness or his own statelessness. You know, no road leads to home, so the tramp is always undecided or ambiguous or trying to go two ways at once. And then you got those tramps in Beckett, you know, the famous tramps in Waiting for Godot, who don't really tramp, they just stand by the road as if they're about to go somewhere. And the play begins with someone trying to take a boot off. You know, the boot, almost archetypal accoutrement to tramping and to being a tramp. A worn out boot. And they're standing by the side of a road, but the road doesn't lead anywhere. Nobody comes, nobody goes, it's awful. Which is kind of the point of the play. And they're just kind of waiting for someone, you know, waiting for Godot, or waiting for God in that one. As if God will somehow, at some point, turn up. But never does, of course. So at the end, you know, it ends with Vladimir and Estragon saying to one another, I can't go on, let's go on. I can't go on, let's go on. You know, a tramp when there is no God to tramp home to. And the only tramping that's going on has been a trampling over them, because of course the villagers in Waiting for God will repeatedly come out and beat them. Yeah. And then there's the tramping that's in hymns, you know. I suppose I'm thinking about this because of the Waiting for Godot. This the hymn that goes, mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord. He is tramping out the vintage where the grapes of wrath are stored. You know. So I've seen the glory of the coming of the Lord. And what's he doing? He's tramping on grapes. It's a kind of stationary walk, kind of stationary tamping. An on-the-spot trample of the grapes of wrath, with the results of that tamping being presumably some kind of wine that's coming out of it. And the coming of the Lord, he doesn't come in Becky, and I don't think he comes in the end of that hymn, to be honest. You see the coming of him, but he never comes, he never goes. It's awful. And you don't go anywhere either. There's just the tramping. And then, of course, there's the sexualisation of the tramp, isn't there? I think I'm right in saying that the gypsies, tramps and thieves that's referred to in that song, the tramp isn't Charlie Chaplin. It's the female version of the tramp, where the wandering doesn't take you endlessly from one place to another, constantly not finding home and not finding God. It's the constantly wandering from one sexual partner to another, and how that might be frowned upon by people who have found their home in a particular sexual partner, or have found their God in a particular relationship, and trade the value of their home or the value of their God for in the marketplace as a transactional aspect of their lives. That's not allowed, is it? It's like being at the crossroads with Charlie Chaplin's boots, or it's like standing by the side of the road waiting for God to arrive. You're stateless and homeless, and the villagers will come and beat you up. There are no grapes of wrath being squeezed and trampled out if you're a tramp. And every night all the men would come around and lay their money down. Tramp. My favourite use of the word tramp, in a song at least, is in a song by Elvis Costello. It's quite an old song now, called Tramp the Dirt Down. And it's about the former Premier of UK, Margaret Thatcher, Conservative Party person, who ran the country for, 12 years. And I'd like to say she was universally despised, but clearly she wasn't, since she kept being re-elected, and many people do still hold her in high esteem. But from my perspective, and the perspective of a lot of people I know, she was a dreadful person. A really, really dreadful person. Broke the unions, broke the back of the country in many ways, I think. Set the wheels in motion that I think resulted in a lot of the despair and a lot of the collapse that we're seeing in this society right now. Turned it into a much more mercantile and much more individualistic society. Not a good thing. Elvis Costello's song is a recording of what he'd like to do on the day when the news finally comes through that the witch is dead. And it's the key lines that keep coming up in that song is these lines, when they finally put you in the ground, I'll stand on your grave and tramp the dirt down. Tramp the dirt down, isn't that great? It's that tamping, firming up the soil so she can't get out, but also rendering yourself superior, finally, to the witch. That little trrr sound. Yeah. Tramp.